Hello, welcome to this course on stress and stress management. Today's topic is chapter 1. We won't cover the entire chapter today. I will just provide an introduction to this chapter. In fact, many of you who have taken my leadership courses know that I usually start my lectures every semester defining what the main construct of that semester is. For example, in the leadership classes, I start out my lecture by defining what leadership is. Now, I won't do that in this lecture though. So in this lecture, I'm not going to discuss what is stress. I think intuitively, you all know what stress is. Now that intuitive understanding may not be perfect, but you all have experienced stress in your lives. You probably are experiencing stress in your lives, due to which you may have decided to take this course. So I think we can start our discussion on stress even before we go about defining what stress is. In fact, I want you to think about what stress is before I provide the definition of what stress is. So in this lecture, I'm going to do three things. One, I will give you some background information about stress in form of the prevalence of stress in the current day. So how prevalent is the problem of stress? Okay. I'll provide you a lot of statistics. The second topic would be some of the common causes of stress. So what are some of the common sources of stress? Again, as per statistics, as per different studies that have been done on the common sources of stress. And third point that I will discuss are some of the major impact that this stress has on our lives. So those are the three topics that I will touch upon. But most of this discussion is going to be in form of I sharing you data from different research studies that have been done trying to answer these three questions. So I think this should provide you with a background that will then help you or urge you to think more about this topic of stress. And actually, before I do that, I must also say that most of my lectures this semester are going to be structured this way. I will not just be repeating or rehashing the material that is there in the textbook. So in my lectures, I will cover what's there in the textbook, at least the important sections. But I will provide you with a lot of additional information, which I think will help you gain much deeper understanding about the topic. Otherwise, it's all redundancy if I just repeat what's there in the textbook, right? Again, those of you who have taken my courses probably are familiar with this approach that I take, but this is even more important in this course because I think many of the textbooks that we have currently on stress and stress management have their own sets of weaknesses without going into so much of detail. So my lectures will be more of a supplemental material. Of course, this will help enhance your knowledge about the topic, but this is also important from the exam point of view. So in the exams, you will be asked questions both from my lectures as well as from the material that is in the textbook. So both are important. Anyway, with that background information, let's dive into the topic. So here in this graph, you can see how much has stress increased in the past 5 years? Now, this is data collected by the American Psychological Association. I didn't find the most graph. So this is data from 2007 through 2011. So they have been collecting data on the prevalence of stress. And when they asked these random group of respondents about how much stress has increased over the past 5 years, or whether it has increased, the majority report that actually it has increased. A smaller percentage say that it has stayed the same, and even smaller percentage of the population say that it has decreased. Now, since I couldn't find the recent most data, I am not sure how the trend is now. But I have no reason to suspect that the trends have changed. What do you think? Do you think stress in your lives, in your personal and professional lives, has it remained the same? Has it decreased or has it increased? What do you think? The next graph that you see here, it's actually just a more detailed analysis of the previous graph. Here, the data that I had shared with you previously is broken down by different generations. So the younger generations, by the millennial generation and the Generation X, they much greater percentage of the younger generation are reporting that their stress has increased. The older generation, much smaller percentage of that population is saying that it has increased. So you are the younger generation. So it seems like a greater percentage. So if I'm betting, probably a much greater percentage of you would be saying that your stress has increased over the past 5 years. So why is that the case? Why do you think that's the case? Any thoughts? This is something that I would like you to reflect in the discussion. But let's delve into this a little deeper. So let's analyze the prevalence of stress by different age groups, by different generations. So here's the data from American Psychological Association. This was published in 2015. You can see that stress amongst the millennials and the Generation Xers is much higher than it is amongst the boomers and matures. So the older the generation, the lesser the stress. The younger the generation, the higher the stress. And we see the exact same pattern of data from the Polaris marketing research as well, that was published in 2012. You see that the younger age group, those between 18 and 34, they report the highest amount of stress. And as you go higher into the age group, older age group, you see that the stress levels are actually decreasing. The percentage of the population that reported not being stressed, which is this green bars, it's actually higher amongst the older age group. So in the older age group, we see lesser percentage of the population saying that they are not stressed. What did I say? Yeah, larger percentage of the population, older population, say that they are not stressed. And a smaller percentage of the older population say that they are stressed, right? So again, why do you think this is the case? I want you to reflect on these questions. There are some possibilities, some possible theories behind why this is the case. I have some of my own explanations behind these trends, but I don't want to share those with you directly right now, at least. I want you to think about these or reflect on these trends, and what do you think are the causes that the older generation, the older people are getting, they are less stressed, and the younger population is more stressed. What do you think are the reasons for that? Now, if we do a more deeper analysis into your age group, which would be college students. We see here, and this is data from Association for University and College Counseling Center Directors, a much greater percentage of students are now showing up at the counseling centers for anxiety related issues. When it comes to depression and relationship issues, not so much, well, little bit of increase or pretty much remain the same. But for anxiety related issues, much greater percentage of students are now showing up at the counseling centers. Now, is this because a greater percentage of the college students experience anxiety problems, or is it because they feel more comfortable going to the counseling centers to discuss their anxiety problems? We can't figure that out, at least from this data, from this graph. Both could be the case. Maybe both are, both the reasons contribute to this trend. But it is certainly alarming that, anxiety problems seem to be more amongst the college students now than it was in the previous years. And there's a lot of information here, and this is also from the Center for Collegiate Mental Health. This is the percentage of students seriously considering suicide, attempting suicide. Again, these are a little older data, but you see, like about quarter or maybe close to 1/3 of the student population, they have contemplated suicide because of stress. And 7 to 11%, with the increasing, but more recent data shows that a much greater percentage, so up to 11.2% of the student population has even considered seriously hurting another person because of whatever mental health issues, whatever stress that they are going through their lives. So stress can be harmful to the person experiencing stress as well as to others, because sometimes you can even harm others if you are going through some mental psychological issues. Elaborating on that suicide data more, because that was a little older data. Now this is more recent data, 2019 data from a study published in the Journal of Abnormal Psychology. You can see here that the percentage of people with depression is actually going up. With the older population. So this line is for people who are over 50 in their age, and this line is for those who are between 26 and 49 years old. It has pretty much remained the same. But amongst the younger age group, you can see that the percentage of depression has gone up dramatically. And in the same study, they also report the percentage that had tried suicide, and you can see again that is higher amongst the younger age group. So I hope you are seeing a trend here. So it's not just one study, but many studies showing that the younger generation, the younger group, is more susceptible to stress and the negative repercussions of stress in form of attempting suicide. So this is again from college stats, and more than 80% of the students say that they experience stress on a daily basis. 13% say that they have experienced depression over the last 3 months. 13% say that they have had major anxiety related mental health issues, and 9%, close to 9%, 10% have contemplated suicide in the past year. So alarming data here. In fact, it turns out that Suicide is the second leading cause of death amongst the younger population. The first is, of course, accidental deaths, but the second most leading cause of death in the young age group, in the youth, is actually suicide. So, pretty concerning data, right? Some more statistics here, and this is from the Journal of Adolescent Health, also published in 2019. You see a much greater percentage of the population, student population, experiencing anxiety, overwhelming anxiety, not just little bit of anxiety, but overwhelming anxiety. And if we contrast this data with what I had shown before, this is actual anxiety. So the experience of anxiety actually has increased over the years, as opposed to people just going to the counseling center for anxiety related issues because of, let's say, much more openness to discuss about anxiety issues. That's not the case here. Here we are seeing that the data that these researchers have been collecting over the years, they find that a greater percentage of the student population, so in this case the undergraduate student population, are actually experiencing anxiety related issues. And even anger, overwhelming anger, has been increasing. Same with depression. So there's an increase in these mood disorders amongst the undergraduate student population. This is from another study. Some of the authors are common across these studies, and this is Healthy Mind study, data from 2007 through 18. Again, you see the same kind of pattern. They are not being able to flourish. This is case of severe depression, self-injury, severe anxiety, suicidal thoughts. So everything seems to be increasing, which should be a matter of concern for everyone concerned. And again, as you can see, similar kind of data from, again, different sources. This is National College Health Assessment data. Suicide ideation increasing, self-injury increasing. People making suicide plans have been increasing percentage. So different data all seem to be directed in the direction of stress increasing, and especially so amongst the younger generation, amongst the youth. So what do you think is causing this stress? That's something that we need to think about. That's something that we need to reflect about. Again, I'm not going to give you definitive answers here. I want you to think about these issues, but I will share some statistics again. So again, the American Psychological Association has been conducting studies over the years, collecting data about the causes of stress. So what do people think is causing stress in their lives? And the data that we see here is that money seems to be one of the major causes of stress amongst the adult population. So this is not just focusing on the youngsters. Money, work-related issues or work-related challenges. Economy seems to be the third important cause. So the economy not doing well, which then will have implications on your earning capacity and everything, right? Increased amount of uncertainty, all those issues, is the third biggest cause of stress. Then comes relationships. So relationships, of course, they can give us a lot of happiness and satisfaction, but they can also be a cause of major stress in our lives. Relationships, both your relationship with your spouse or boyfriends, girlfriends, or even relationship with your kids. And some of these are interrelated. Family responsibilities. You may have different family responsibilities. That's the next bigger cause. Health problems affecting the family. So all these are pertaining to family issues. So if you have an older parent who has health problems, so you will have greater responsibilities then to take care of this person, which would then lead you to experience more stress in your lives. Uh, but even your own health, personal health issues can cause stress. Job stability, again, job stability may be also related to the economy, right? So, not always directly. Sometimes it may be related to the economy, sometimes it may be related to the company's culture. But these are some of the common causes of stress as reported by people themselves. Housing costs increasing. Personal safety, thankfully, is a much smaller percentage of the population reporting that they are worried of their own personal safety. Now, this is all American data. Now, of course, if we collected information, uh, again, American Psychological Association may have collected information on these parameters over the last few weeks or months, especially related to the election. With all the rioting going on in many places around the country, maybe this personal safety numbers now would be much higher. Uh, I don't have the data to uh, say that, but compared to many other places in the world, America typically is seen as a safer place. So, if you compare, for instance, with somebody in Syria, where there's civil war going on, people dying, so there is a much greater concern for your physical safety there, personal safety there, your family's safety there. Thankfully, in developed countries, in established democracies, that isn't so much of a problem. Uh, but that may not have been the case in the last 1 year, especially where we have seen a lot of rioting happening. But anyway, these are some of the causes of stress as reported by the respondents of these studies. We just finished one election, so election can also be a cause of stress. The data that you are seeing here is from the last presidential election, so 2016 election. So about 52% of the American adults reported experiencing stress because of the election. And the stress was higher, 59% amongst the Republicans, than it was amongst the Democrats. 55% of the Democrats said that they experienced stress because of the election. So this is 2016 data. And here you can see how election caused stress amongst the different generations. Here you can see how election caused stress amongst the different ethnicities, different races. Now, the percentages vary, based on your affiliation, political affiliation, or based on your race and ethnicity and your age group. But it seems like, all groups do experience stress. Some groups more than others, but looks like even elections cause a lot of stress. Now, election is an important part of democracy, and but at least elections, the way they have been happening over the recent years, seems to be causing a lot of stress because there's a lot of division in the society. Now, this is more recent data. So this is 2020 election data. So if you saw here, 52% of the American population in the last election reported feeling stressed because of the election. That has gone up to 68% during the last election, the 2020 presidential election. So from 52, it has gone up. Now, things have switched around also by the political affiliation. So much greater percentage of the Democrats reported experiencing stress than the Republicans. But even the independents, they also experienced a lot of stress. So this is all American Psychological Association's data on how elections can be a source of stress in the population. This is from the 2016 data, but because I couldn't find the most recent data on this parameter. But the more social media that you use, be it Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, whatever, the more stress you experience. People who don't use as much social media tend to experience less stress. And this is pertaining to the election. And I think the difference between those who use social media versus those who don't, the difference in their stress levels will be much more magnified currently than it was in 2016. 2016 was a pretty controversial election, but things got heightened even more in the 2020 elections, which I think once we have all this data, we will see the results to be even more magnified here. Now, we cannot also not ignore one of the most recent causes of stress, which is the COVID-19 pandemic. And so let's take a look at some of that data. So the stress arising from the COVID-19 pandemic is gradually starting to decrease, because we have gotten used to used to this new normal. But initially, when the COVID-19 problem came up and there was this lockdown, there was a much higher level of stress amongst all age groups, irrespective of whether you were living alone or not alone, with child or without a child, but it was high amongst everyone. It was highest if you were living with a child. But as the weeks have passed by, and especially after the easing of the lockdown, we are getting a little bit more used to this new normal. So our stress levels have decreased. But still, it is, even if it has decreased, it is still in close to 20%, 18, 20%. So it has not come down to zero yet. So we still see a level of stress in the population because of the COVID-19 pandemic. And here's a little bit more detailed analysis of how the COVID-19 pandemic has resulted in stress. So family member getting coronavirus, 74% reporting that as a stress. The government's response to coronavirus, and so on and so forth. So you can see all this data yourself here. So the point of all this data is that different studies seem to be giving you some insights about what is causing stress in the population. What is causing stress in you? But what do you think is the cause of stress? These are all data from different studies. What do you think are the real causes of stress? Or is the real cause of stress that we are experiencing? So again, I want you to think about this question and reflect on it and share your thoughts in the discussion board. The last part of today's lecture is going to touch upon some of the effects of stress. Primarily from a health angle. There are a lot of other effects which we will delve deeper as we move through the semester. But from a bird's eye point of view, if we analyze the effects of stress, how does stress affect us? So what's the leading cause of death in the USA? If we contrast the leading cause of death now versus what it was a century ago, we will see a major difference. Now it turns out heart disease and cancer are the biggest cause of death in America. There are other factors, but they are much smaller compared to these factors, heart disease and cancer. So these are what we call our lifestyle related diseases. So as I was saying, if we compare the causes of death now as compared to what it was in the 1900s, just a little over a century ago, we will see a dramatically different pattern. So cancer and heart disease in 2010 are of course the largest contributor of disease now, but in 1900 they were a much smaller percentage of heart disease and cancer related deaths. So what was the major cause of death in 1900s? Any guesses? They were actually infection related issues. So all different kinds of infections, pneumonia, tuberculosis, even gastrointestinal infections, diphtheria, all were the primary causes of death in the 1900, just 120 years ago, was infection related diseases. So 46% of the deaths then were related to infections. Now, of course, 47% of the deaths are related to heart and cancer related issues, more what we call our lifestyle diseases. So, why do you think we see this change? Of course, one is that with the development of antibiotics and the quality of healthcare, fewer people are dying from infection related issues, right? That's one thing. So that will then, of course, mess up the percentages. But what we had seen before, that there has been increasing experience of stress amongst ourselves, could that also be the reason why we are having greater amounts of heart related diseases and cancer related problems, which are directly or indirectly attributed to stress? It turns out, so by the way, this is a pie chart depiction of the causes of stress again from 1900 through 2010. So infectious diseases, 53% of the deaths were from different kinds of infections. Heart disease was only 12% of the population then, but now heart disease, 33% of the population die because of heart disease, 32% from cancer. Cancer was only 6% in 1900. So what has changed over a century that we see dramatically different pattern of deaths? One is, as we touched upon, that we have access to antibiotics and everything, which has reduced the infection related diseases, deaths due to those factors. But then why has there been a huge increase in the percentage of deaths from cancer and heart disease? Is it related to stress? I want you to think about it. I want you to reflect upon it in the discussion forum. It turns out, and this is by the estimates of a study published in 2005 by Young and Walsh, currently meaning this is 2005 data, current data may be even worse, but about 80% of the visits to your physician can be attributed to stress related factors. Only 20% of your visits to the physicians are for other causes that are not stress related. So in that study, they estimated that 80% of your doctor visits are related to you having stress in your lives. And if we talk about death, their estimate was that 50% of your deaths, currently adult deaths, are related to stress factors. So people experiencing stress, because of that, they're developing heart problems and dying. And about again another 50% due to non-stress related factors. So from this, we can figure out that stress has huge negative impact on our lives by making us more sick and making us die sooner. Here's more updated data. This is from 2011 American Psychological Association's data. And they find that 43% of all adults in USA suffer from adverse health effects due to stress. 80% is similar to what the previous study had found. 80% of the primary care physicians, people visit them because of stress related issues. And it turns out, if we see gender differences, we see that women tend to be reporting greater negative impact on health from stress than men. So these are based on self-report surveys. So is it actually the case or not is not something that we get to know from this graph. But based on people's self-report, women tend to feel that their stress in their lives has had a greater, strong to very strong negative impact on health. 88% for women, 78% for men. So we see here through all this data that there is a lot of stress. So the prevalence of stress is high, more so in the younger population. We also went through some of the common causes of stress, again, as reported by people themselves. And we also went through some data showing that this heightened stress in our lives is having huge negative impact on our health and ultimately leading to premature death. So, what can we do about it? This is the question that I want you to think about. It seems like we have absolutely no control over stress, right? But this picture that you see here, I don't know how many of you have seen this picture, but this was one of the most horrifying pictures that was ever taken by a journalist. And here you see a monk, Vietnamese monk, self-immolating himself. So this is from 1963. So in the Vietnam at that point of time, there was a regime that was against the Buddhists. The regime then was very pro-Catholic, and they were they were creating a lot of difficulties and problems. They were oppressing the local Buddhist population, and anything and everything that the Buddhist population was doing was not getting the attention of the international press. So, but Buddhists, on the other hand, they also believed in non-violence. They didn't want to be engaging in violence against the existing regime. So the monks, after some deliberation, they decided that one of the monks will self-immolate himself in one of the busiest streets of Vietnam. So this was captured by one of the journalists. Now, the reason I'm showing this picture is, of course, we can only see the picture. We are not seeing a video here. But all the reports that, even in the picture, you see he's starting to burn in this picture, in the first picture here. The flames are huge. But in the later picture, by this time, you can see his body has burnt a lot. We can see here in this picture. But the monk is still stable, still calm, still composed. He is not running away in panic that his entire body is burning. So, what does this tell us, this incident? I think it gives us some interesting insights about the experience of stress and how we manage it. Now, again, I'm not defining what stress is yet. That's something that we will do it in the next class. But for all of us, I think for all of us common folks, if our body is burning, we will be extremely stressed, even if it is a small part of the body. We will be feeling completely out of control. But here we see a monk who is completely under control, completely under the control in terms of not panicking. I'm sure the monk is still experiencing pain, but he is in control of himself. Even if his entire body is burning, he is still calm, composed in his meditative posture. So the point that I'm trying to make here is that stress is not automatic. Going back to our slides, what I mean is that all those causes of stress that we had seen before, where is that? I think. So money problems, work problems, economy problems, relationship problems. When we take a look at this graph, it gives us the impression that if we have money problems, we will automatically experience stress. If we have work problems, then we will automatically experience stress. If we have relationship problems, then we will automatically experience stress. But that need not be the case, is what I'm driving at. Stress is not automatic. We have the ability to not allow the problems in our lives impact us. And the classic example, or the best example that I could show you for that, is this monk's example, where his entire body is burning, but he is still being able to stay calm and composed. Okay. So I will stop the lecture with just a short clips of some videos here. So you can see snakes here, right? You are walking across the street and suddenly you see a snake. Would it create panic in you? I think it will, right? But here in this video, we see people who are experts, snake handlers. They are dealing with these extremely venomous snakes. They don't seem to be as stressed, right? Here's another video. Many of you may have seen some of his lectures. He is a Indian monk, Hindu monk. He's popularly known as Sadhguru.
Well, because most people will never get to see a king cobra in their life. It's not a...
Again, I don't want to show the entire video. If you are interested, you can watch the video on your own, because I have those links here in the PowerPoint slide. Here, I have those links here. But point is, snakes would, I think, cause panic in most of us, because especially if they are venomous snakes. But it does not cause panic in everyone. If you are a trained snake handler, or like this spiritual monk, even he seems to be completely at ease while handling a highly venomous snake. The point here again and again that I'm making is that stress reaction is not automatic. We can control this stress response that we assume is automatic. And that's the basic philosophy of this entire course that you will be taking. How to regain that control, how to not let the problems in our lives affect us. So that's what this course is about. So I want you to think about the different questions that I asked, and I want you to reflect on those questions in the discussion board. In the next class, I will go over the definition of stress, and then what implications does that then have with respect to managing stress. Thank you.